Welcome back to Hopeful Horizon, where we bring you stories that inspire, challenge, and remind us of the power of resilience. Today's tale is one of strength, redemption, and the courage to stand tall in the face of adversity. It begins with Tasha Jenkins, a former military combat medic turned EMS driver who stops at a gas station for a quick break. But her quiet moment is interrupted by a gang of rowdy bikers who underestimate her resolve. What unfolds next is a gripping confrontation that leads to an unexpected twist, forcing everyone involved to confront their prejudices and find humanity in unlikely places. If you love stories filled with resilience, redemption, and transformative moments, you're in for an unforgettable journey. Don't forget to leave a comment below and let us know where you're listening from. And be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a story that touches your heart and fuels your spirit. The steady hum of the ambulance engine faded as Tasha Jenkins pulled into the gas station. The dim glow of the neon sign buzzed faintly overhead, casting an orange hue across the near-empty parking lot. Tasha's shift had been grueling, 2 cardiac emergencies and a highway pileup that left her mentally and physically drained. As an EMS driver and former combat medic, she was no stranger to chaos. But tonight, she craved nothing more than a strong coffee and a moment to breathe. Stepping out of the ambulance, she adjusted her navy blue uniform and headed toward the convenience store. Her boots crunched on the gravel, a sound that mingled with the distant chirp of crickets. Inside, the store was quiet. A lone attendant stood behind the counter, scrolling through his phone. Tasha offered him a polite nod before heading to the coffee machine, her mind wandering to the quiet apartment waiting for her after her shift. As she filled her cup, the distant roar of engines pierced the tranquility. She glanced through the glass doors just in time to see a group of motorcycles rumble into the parking lot. The riders were clad in leather jackets, adorned with patches and insignias that marked their allegiance to some nameless biker gang. At their head was a hulking figure whose presence commanded attention. His long, unkempt beard and piercing eyes made him look every bit the part of a gang leader. Tasha didn't need an introduction to know his type: brash, cocky, and itching for trouble. The riders dismounted, their boots thudding against the asphalt. The leader, who she later learned was called Steele, surveyed the station like he owned it. His gaze landed on the ambulance, then shifted to Tasha as she stepped out of the store. His lips curled into a sneer. "Well, well, what do we have here?" Steele's voice was a deep rumble, loud enough to carry across the lot. The other bikers chuckled, their laughter filled with malice. "An ambulance driver? You lost, sweetheart?" Tasha's eyes narrowed, but she kept her composure. "Just grabbing some coffee," she replied, her tone even. She'd dealt with men like this before, arrogant, disrespectful, and quick to underestimate her. Steele's gang sauntered closer, their presence suffocating. One of them, a wiry man with tattoos snaking up his neck, snatched her coffee cup and sniffed it. "What's this? Looks a little weak," he jeered before tossing it to the ground. The liquid splattered across the concrete, a dark stain spreading like a challenge. Tasha clenched her jaw. "I'd appreciate it if you stepped away from my ambulance," she said, her voice steady but firm. Steele chuckled, a low, menacing sound. "Or what? You gonna call the cops? Maybe you'll patch us up if we get hurt?" He stepped closer, invading her space. "Face it, lady, you're out of your league." The gang circled her ambulance, banging on its sides and laughing like hyenas. The attendant inside the store peeked out nervously, but made no move to intervene. Tasha's hands itched to act, but she knew the importance of picking her battles. Her military training had taught her to assess situations, to wait for the right moment. Steele grabbed another cup of coffee from a nearby machine, his eyes never leaving Tasha. He walked up to her, a smug grin plastered across his face, and poured the steaming liquid onto the ground in front of her boots. "Oops," he said mockingly. "Guess you'll have to clean that up too." Tasha took a deep breath, her military instincts kicking in. She didn't flinch, didn't step back. Instead, she met Steele's gaze, her own steady and unyielding. "You really don't want to do this," she said, her voice calm, but carrying a weight that made even the air around them feel heavier. The gang erupted in laughter, but it was nervous, unsure. Steele's grin faltered for a fraction of a second before he leaned in closer. "Oh, I think I do," he growled. The tension in the air was palpable, a taut wire ready to snap. Tasha shifted her stance ever so slightly, her fingers brushing against the ID badge clipped to her uniform. Her eyes darted to the ambulance, then back to the gang. "Last chance," she warned, her voice a quiet storm. But Steele and his crew were too caught up in their bravado to notice the storm brewing right in front of them. The first biker, a bulky man with a scar running down his cheek, made the mistake of grabbing Tasha's arm. In one fluid motion, she twisted free, pivoted on her heel, and used his momentum against him. He hit the ground hard, clutching his wrist in pain. The rest of the gang froze, their laughter replaced by stunned silence. Steele's expression darkened as he stepped forward, his fists clenched. "Big mistake," he snarled. Tasha didn't reply. Her eyes scanned the group, assessing their positions and potential weaknesses. She'd been in tougher situations before, both on the battlefield and in her EMS career. This was just another challenge, one she was more than equipped to handle. Another biker lunged at her, but Tasha sidestepped him with ease, sending him sprawling into a stack of firewood near the gas station's entrance. The attendant inside the store fumbled for the phone, his hands shaking as he dialed the police. Steele's jaw tightened as he watched two of his men incapacitated in under a minute. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a switchblade, flicking it open with a metallic click. "You think you're tough?" he hissed, advancing on her. "Let's see how tough you really are." Tasha held her ground, her posture relaxed but ready. "I've dealt with worse than you," she said, her tone almost casual. "And I promise you're not going to like how this ends." Steele lunged, the blade aimed at her midsection. Tasha moved with practiced precision, sidestepping the attack and delivering a swift strike to his wrist. The knife clattered to the ground, and she kicked it out of reach. Before Steele could recover, Tasha grabbed a nearby gas nozzle and pointed it at him. "I don't think you want to know what happens if I pull this trigger," she said, her voice low and menacing. The other bikers hesitated, their confidence shaken. One of them muttered something about calling it quits, but Steele glared at him, his pride too wounded to retreat. "You're making a big mistake," he growled. "You don't know who you're messing with." Tasha's lips curled into a faint smile. "Neither do you," she replied. The sound of sirens in the distance finally broke the standoff. The gas station attendant had managed to get through to the police, and their approach was enough to make the bikers reconsider their position. Steele spat on the ground, his eyes burning with hatred. "This isn't over," he said, backing away. "We'll see you again." Tasha didn't lower her guard until the bikers had mounted their motorcycles and roared out of the parking lot. Even then, her instincts told her the trouble wasn't truly over. As the police arrived, the officers approached her with questions, but Tasha's focus was elsewhere. She watched the red taillights of the motorcycles fade into the distance, her mind already calculating the next move. The gas station fell silent once more, but the tension lingered in the air. Tasha climbed back into her ambulance, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. She'd won this round, but something told her the battle was far from over. The bikers would be back, and next time, they'd come prepared. With a deep breath, she started the engine and pulled onto the highway. The night stretched out before her, dark and uncertain, but Tasha Jenkins had faced worse. Whatever came next, she was ready. The night was unusually still as Tasha leaned against the counter of her EMS station, sipping a lukewarm cup of coffee. She had just finished restocking the ambulance after a minor call and was considering catching a quick nap before her next shift. Suddenly, the dispatch radio crackled to life, the dispatcher's voice sharp and urgent. "Motorcycle accident on Highway 14. 2 critical injuries reported. Responding unit, please confirm." Tasha straightened immediately, the remnants of her exhaustion evaporating. "Unit 47 responding," she said into the radio, grabbing her gear. Her partner, Julio, a calm and experienced paramedic, joined her within moments. The ambulance roared to life, its sirens piercing the quiet of the night. As they sped toward the scene, Tasha couldn't shake an uneasy feeling. Highway 14 was notorious for its sharp curves and reckless drivers, The dispatcher had mentioned motorcycles, a bad combination on such a treacherous stretch of road. When they arrived, the scene was chaotic. The red and blue lights of police cruisers painted the asphalt, and a group of bikers stood in a huddle near the crash site, their faces pale and anxious. Two motorcycles lay twisted and broken on the shoulder of the road, their chrome frames glinting in the flashing lights. Tasha's heart sank when she recognized the hulking figure sprawled on the ground, Steele. "Tasha," Julio said, nodding toward the second victim, "we've got multiple traumas here. Let's move." Tasha knelt beside Steele, quickly assessing his injuries. His helmet had likely saved his life, but he was unconscious, with a deep gash on his forehead and a broken leg twisted at an unnatural angle. His breathing was shallow, and his pulse was weak. Nearby, another biker groaned in pain, clutching his side. "Start with him," Tasha told Julio, gesturing to the other man. "I've got this one." As she worked to stabilize Steele, the bikers watched in tense silence. One of them, a wiry man with a scruffy beard, leaned in and whispered, "That's her. That's the woman from the gas station." Steele's eyes fluttered open at the sound, his gaze unfocused but locking onto Tasha's face. For a moment, confusion and fear flickered across his features. Tasha met his gaze steadily, her hands moving with practiced precision to secure a neck brace and splint his leg. "Looks like you're in my hands now," she said softly but firmly. "Just stay with me, Steele." His lips moved as if he wanted to speak, but no sound came out. Tasha wasn't sure if it was the pain or something else silencing him. She turned her attention back to the task at hand, her focus unshaken. Julio joined her moments later, giving a quick update. "The other guy's stable for now, but he's got a few broken ribs. We'll need to transport them both ASAP." "Let's move," Tasha said, motioning to the stretcher. Together they loaded Steele into the ambulance, the bikers stepping back to give them space. For the first time, they seemed subdued, their earlier bravado replaced by a mix of fear and guilt. As the ambulance doors closed, Tasha caught a glimpse of one of the bikers, a younger man with a shaved head, looking at her with wide eyes. He mouthed the words, "Thank you," before she turned away. Inside the ambulance, the atmosphere was tense. Steele's breathing was shallow, and his pulse remained weak. Tasha monitored him closely, administering fluids and pain relief, while Julio relayed their status to the hospital. Despite everything that had happened earlier, Tasha felt no anger towards Steele. In her line of work, saving lives came first, no matter who the person was. When they finally arrived at the hospital, a team of doctors and nurses took over, rushing Steele and the other biker into the emergency room. Tasha and Julio stayed long enough to complete their reports before heading back to the station. As they drove away, Tasha couldn't shake the image of Steele's face, a mixture of fear and gratitude etched into his features. The hospital corridor was quiet, save for the occasional beep of monitors and the soft murmur of voices. Steele lay in a private room, his leg in a cast and his head bandaged. His crew had gathered around him, their usual bravado replaced by a somber silence. When Tasha entered the room to check on him, all eyes turned to her. The tension was palpable, but she ignored it, focusing on her patient. Steele's eyes met hers, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. "How's the leg?" she asked, her tone professional. Steele hesitated before responding, his voice hoarse. "Hurts like hell, but I'll live." Tasha nodded, checking his chart and making a few notes. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only when one of the bikers, a younger man named Jake, spoke up. "Why did you help us?" he asked, his voice tinged with genuine curiosity. "After what we did to you? Why?" Tasha looked up, meeting Jake's gaze. "Because that's my job," she said simply. "I don't get to choose who deserves to be saved. Everyone does, even you." Steele shifted uncomfortably, his expression hard to read. Finally, he cleared his throat. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice low but steady. "What we did back there, it was wrong. I was wrong." Tasha crossed her arms, studying him. "Why?" she asked. "Why act that way in the first place?" Steele's eyes dropped to his hands, which were folded in his lap. "Because I didn't see you," he admitted. "Not really. I saw a uniform, a woman, someone I thought I could push around. I didn't stop to think about who you are or what you've been through." Tasha nodded, her expression softening slightly. "And now?" Steele looked up, his gaze meeting hers. "Now I see someone stronger than me, smarter than me, better than me." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "And I'm sorry." Before Tasha could respond, Steele continued. "There's something else you should know," he said. "A few months ago, my son was in a car accident. It was bad, real bad. The EMS crew that saved him. It was you, wasn't it?" Tasha's breath caught in her throat. She remembered the call vividly, a teenage boy trapped in a mangled car, his life hanging by a thread. She had worked tirelessly to stabilize him, refusing to give up until he was safe. "Yes," she said quietly. "That was me." Steele's eyes filled with tears, and he nodded slowly. "You saved my son's life, and now you've saved mine. I don't know how to repay that." Tasha took a deep breath, her voice firm but kind. "You repay it by doing better, by being better. Teach your crew to respect people, no matter who they are or what they look like. That's how you repay it." Steele nodded again, his expression resolute. "I will. I promise." As Tasha turned to leave, Jake spoke up once more. "Thank you," he said, his voice earnest, "for everything." Tasha gave him a small smile. "Just doing my job," she said, walking out of the room. Outside, the night air was cool and refreshing. Tasha climbed into her ambulance, her mind heavy with the events of the past 24 hours. As she drove away, she glanced in the rearview mirror, seeing the hospital fade into the distance. In the room she had left behind, Steele sat quietly, surrounded by his crew. For the first time in years, he felt a spark of something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. And as he resolved to honor the second chance he'd been given, he knew one thing for certain. He would never forget the woman who had saved his life, not once, but twice. Thank you for joining us on this unforgettable journey of courage, compassion, and transformation. Tasha's story is a reminder that strength isn't just about physical power. It's about standing up for what's right and using every moment to make a difference. If this story moved you, be sure to leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Don't forget to let us know where you're listening from. And while you're here, subscribe and hit the bell so you'll never miss another story that inspires, challenges, and leaves you thinking long after it's over. Thank you for being a part of our Hopeful Horizon community. Until next time, stay hopeful, stay courageous, and always remember the power of second chances.